Okay, so here we are in the timeline video. So in this video, we're going to go into a bit more detail on the timeline panel. And that's the panel at the bottom of your interface. So you can see here, timeline tab. Now I created this scene so you can have something to look at and we can go through some sound and some of the controls and why the timeline is so important. So let's start with the play and pause button. Press it to play and press it to pause, right? And the shortcut for that is Shift Enter. So you hold Shift and tap Enter to play and pause while holding Shift all the time. Now, right now you can see that it stops when we play it, when it reaches the end, which is frame 32, right? If we click this button, it will allow us to loop. And I've animated this so it loops kind of perfectly. And you can see it's going to go on forever. Now, while it's playing, this here is the frame rate. So it's basically playing at the desired frame rate, which is 24 frames per second. We can always change that to 12. Oops. Or whatever, for your preview purposes. I would recommend keeping it at the final frames per second. But you can get an idea of the motion slowed down and correct any issues. Let's set that back to 24. Okay, so moving on to the next button. Now, this button is the render and play, I believe. Let's hover over it. Yep, the render and play button. I think I had different names in earlier versions. But this allows you to watch to basically render what you have inside of Harmony and watch it in a kind of internal player. So if we click this, it's going to render. That was fast. Wow. In a big production, it usually takes really long. So it's going to load up a separate player and load all of those rendered frames. Now the background is black because we don't have a background. So remember I went through in the earlier videos. This is the OpenGL view and this is the render view. So it basically takes the render view and renders out all the frames and opens it in play. Toon Boom Harmony Play. And here you can kind of watch it play back in its full quality, not just OpenGL. Now, this is a nice feature for small scenes when you don't want to export and do all the settings and all that. So you can get a preview. But keep in mind that when you do this, let's go to our scene. When you do this, if you go into the frames folder, Harmony creates frames for every for every frame of your scene so that it can load these images here for you to watch. So depending on the size of your scene, I mean, having thousands of images is going to make your folder much larger. So this, if we go to the properties really quickly, oops, you can see here, this is only 4 megabytes, but there have been instances where I've done that and it has been like 800 megabytes. So just keep that in mind. If you have time, I would always recommend exporting. So close that. And that is the render and play button. So I also included some sound in this scene. So if we click this will allow us to hear sound when we play it. Yeah, nice footsteps, huh? So just pretty simple footsteps, but so this is how you can hear sound in Harmony in your scene. And the other speaker icon here is for scrubbing. Scrubbing is when you click and hold the red seek here. It's called a seek. When you click and drag, this allows you to scrub through your animation at your own pace. So you can say, okay, well, his foot is okay, you know. So you can scrub through your animation slowly. And sometimes you might want sound when you do that. Just like in this case, we want to see if his foot is landing on the sound. So we click that. Yep, it's landing pretty sweet to me. So that is what the sound scrub button is for. So let's click that off. Actually, we can leave this on because it's pretty nice. Now, as for the other options up here, this tells you the frame you are on currently. As you can see, there are frame markers here like 10, 20, they go in tens. So if you're anywhere in the middle, if you ever want to know what frame that is, it's right here. The start and stop markers here are for your preview range. So right now we're technically previewing the whole range of the scene. But if we go here and click start and then go here and click stop, you can see these markers here and the highlighted area. Now if we press play, it's only going to play that portion. So that is really useful when you have long scenes or you want to focus in on a particular action and you only want to play that. So you can also move them yourself. Sometimes it becomes a bit hard to grab, like, you know, like a bit difficult. So these buttons are pretty nice. And lastly, we kind of went through the FPS already. There's some presets and you can type in your own. So that's a quick run through of the tools here at the top. You may have noticed I kind of jumped over this. I call it the scrubby thing because if you click and hold, you can scrub without ever touching the seek, right? And it's nice. It is nice. I can't complain. I use it sometimes. It's really intuitive. But yeah, you can use this to scrub as well. This is kind of a lever. So if you click it, it will play at a certain rate and then increase the rate, slow it down, reverse. So this is nice as well. So that covers the timelines controls. Now let's talk about layers. So what we have here is actually a rig. So click your transform tool or press Shift T. And a rig is basically a combination of drawings and pegs that you can move around to create your animation. So if we zoom in here, right, pan around, I can actually click this arm and do that. So the arms are separate pieces and the legs are separate pieces. You can see I kind of break the illusion here. So these are all represented in the timeline as, oh, actually, let's undo that. These are represented in the timeline as layers. So you can see here, this is a layer, this is a group in the node view. And if we click this, we can expand this peg. If we come down, now this little icon here is representing a drawing. That's what that means. And we'll get into this in the next video and, you know, what it means and how to manipulate it, etc. But you can see here, actually, let me show you a much better example because this is a pretty complicated rig. So let us plug this out and you can see it updates here. When it's plugged in, it shows up in the timeline. Now go in here and actually let's use this. Click that to create a new drawing. Let's call this circle. Yes, I know I'm a creative mastermind. So click add and close and you see circle appears here at the bottom. And if we move it over here, well, over here, you can see it's to the right. In Harmony, they present the artwork to you from left to right or right to left, however you want to look at it. But what is on the left is on top, and what is on the right is underneath. And you can see that represented here. It's kind of like Photoshop or, most 2D applications that use layers. So if I were to go to my brush tool and do that and go back to the transform tool, you can see it appears behind the egg fool, right? So that's something to keep in mind, and that is how Harmony manages its layers and its drawings in the timeline and in the node view. So if we want this to show up on top, we can click and drag that and carry it to the left. So let's just carry it over here. Okay, so this is pretty distracting, so I'm going to click this and press D to disable that group. Let us go through exposures. And let us delete that, select tool. Actually, let's delete this altogether. Let's start fresh. So we're going to plug this out so that it doesn't show up in our timeline. And we're going to press Control R in the node view and create head. Let's call it head. Add and close. Now let's bring this over here. And you can see the difference between creating a drawing here and here. If we click this, the drawing's already plugged in. Oops, click close. But if we create it here, we have to plug it in ourselves. So let's plug it in and it's here. Now let's go to frame 1 and do something. Let's click the brush tool or Alt B. And we can't draw anything because nothing is selected. So select the head and let us draw a circle. Not bad. Yours is probably better than mine. So if we were to press play, actually let's disable the sound. But you notice the circle disappeared, and that is simply because it is only exposed on that one frame. If you press 2 a few times to zoom in here, you can see this is frame 1, and this little square, let us click off. This little square represents our image. Now, I don't want to get too deep into animation history and photography and all that stuff, but the concept of exposures is basically from film. So the film had to be exposed in order to see an image. And that's what you're kind of dealing with here. So basically, the drawing we made is only exposed for one frame. So if we go over here and click any frame we want it to be exposed on, we can press F5. Now that drawing is going to be exposed up to that point, which is frame 10. So after frame 10 is going to disappear. So if we want it to show up for the entire range, we can go all the way to the end here and press F5. And if we press play, it's going to show up for, the entire range of the timeline. Now, that is the core, that's like the core essence of exposures in Harmony. There's obviously a whole lot more to them, and I will go through right now a little more before we get to the drawing tools video. So let us look here for a second. So we have our drawing exposed for the entire scene, right? But it's the same drawing, so nothing's animating, So let us actually click and drag from frame 3 to the end and press delete. Now what we just did is delete the exposures. So the drawing still exists. If we go to frame 2, it's still there, right? So it's still exists. If you delete things from here, they still exist. They're just not exposed. They're not showing up. So, and this is a nice little trick here. Let's go here. We know roughly where the circle is. Let's go to frame 3 and draw the circle again. Wow, I couldn't even. Okay, that's not too bad. So what we just did is drew art on an empty cell. So if I go forward, you can see head, which is the name of our drawing, empty cell. That means there's nothing on this cell, which is another film reference, by the way. There's nothing on this cell for us to see as empty. And if Harmony realizes you drew on an empty cell, it will go ahead and expose it for you. Right? It's going to go ahead and expose it here and fill in the blanks behind it. So let's undo. Right. Now, if we scrub, you can see we're now, well, I mean, we're animating. So this is the first drawing we had, and this is the second drawing. And if we move that away, you can see there's a line here separating the two. That is so you know the drawing has changed. So we can, well, in later versions of Harmony, there are these two nice handles. You can click and drag to expose it a bit more interactively, right? On earlier versions, you're going to want to click and press F5, or you can also right click and go to the exposure. Oh, oops, it's right here. Extend exposure, and that will extend it up to that point. So this is the foundation of traditional animation in Harmony. So let us delete this. And what I'm going to do is jump forward a little bit so we can do a little animation. So let us click here, and I want you to turn on your onion skins. And that is this button. And you will see a red or pink, depending on your version of Harmony, circles show up here. So this is showing you your previous frame and your next frame. We don't have a next frame, so there's nothing to be seen. So you can, I will go ahead and create. Wow, that is, okay, good. And then I will go forward a bit more here because I know Harmony is going to fill in that gap for me. And let's just redraw the circle. It doesn't have to be perfect. Actually, I don't want it to be perfect. That's the point. And we're going to go every other frame and just try to redraw that circle. That's it. And what is, oh my gosh. And what is happening here, ooh, that was nice, is we are animating. We're creating a new drawing every 2 frames. And when we play it back, that was horrible. When we play it back, it is going to, I guess, wobble. That's the best way to put it. Oh boy. For our last frame, let's go here and press F5 and play. You've just animated a horrible looking circle. Congrats. Don't worry, mine doesn't really look that good either. So that is the core of traditional animation here. And these drawings are all individual. All right, so I could come here and draw 2 eyes. Those eyes are really good. But they only show up on that drawing. But you get the idea. So exposures are very important. I suggest that you get accustomed to understanding how to use them, you know, what they are, how to expose, how to delete. So that sums it up for the timeline view. I hope you got a better understanding. You're more comfortable in this panel, and you can kind of, technically, you could go ahead and animate right now. You know how to animate in Harmony. So congrats. So That's it. I hope you had fun and you are now more comfortable in the timeline view. You can feel free to animate something whimsical until the next video. So, peace.